Thank you so much for joining me on the Success Story podcast, where we speak with incredible leaders and mentors and unpack their story. Very excited today to be sitting down with Anthony Scaramucci. Now, if you have been living under a rock, Anthony Scaramucci has a numerous amount of accolades behind him. He's the founder, co-managing partner of Skybridge Capital. He's the author of 4 books. He has several incredible rankings, including the number 85 on Worth's magazine, most powerful people in the world of global finance. In 2011, he received Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year award. And obviously, he's somewhat famous for being and serving as the White House Communications Director for a period in July of 2017. So Anthony, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I just want to, get a little bit of where you've come from and what sort of led you to, the resume you have today.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on, and you're being very kind. You could have mentioned that I got fired from the White House after 11 days, although I'm assuming a lot of people would have already known that. But the good news is, 3 years later, in hindsight, it looks like it was actually helpful to my career as opposed to as damaging as I thought it was going to be at that moment. But so my origin story, I guess, is fairly typical of people that grew up in a blue-collar family on Long Island. I think I got lucky in the sense that I went to a very good public high school, had high grades there, high test scores, ended up going to Tufts University, which was a little struggle for my family because my dad was an hourly worker, and we figured it out through a couple of jobs during the summer, and obviously, student debt and different things like that. But I did well at Tufts, ended up going to Harvard Law School after Tufts, and then my career started at Goldman Sachs, where I spent 7 years in private banking. I left Goldman Sachs at age 32, which is, when you're talking about people's success arcs, there's a great line about entrepreneurs from Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx. He said, if I knew how goddamn hard it was, I never would have done it. And so, but entrepreneurs do that sort of stuff. And so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, always wanted to have my own business. So I left Goldman, was making reasonably good to great money there. And I started my business with a gentleman by the name of Andy Bozart in December of 1996. And we got quite lucky. The markets were in a roaring bull market. We frankly made a lot of mistakes, but there's an expression on Wall Street, don't confuse brains with a bull market. And so the market sort of carried us up. We did very, very well. We got a hiccup and a shock in 1998 with the long-term capital management crisis, powered through that. The current pandemic, I'm into my 9th crisis on Wall Street. So I've seen this movie. It comes out in varying forms over the years, but we had a crisis in 98. We ended up selling our business about 4 weeks after 9/11. In 2001, we sold to a firm called Neuberger Berman. Neuberger then got bought by Lehman Brothers. I worked there for a few years. And then in March of 2005, I set up Skybridge Capital, where I have been less the 11 days in the White House. This has been my sort of prima facie responsibility. We've got $10.5 billion under management. We're basically an integrated fund-to-funds platform for high net worth individuals. And we also have a pension advisory business. So that is, in a nutshell, my career. I've done some fun things as well. I launched the Skybridge SALT conference in 2009, coming out of the last crisis. I thought that was a great idea to start to reconnect people. So that's been a 10-year-old conference. Unfortunately, we couldn't have it this year. I had to cancel it because of the Bellagio Hotel, where we typically have it, is closed. And so unfortunately, we couldn't get the conference done this year. But that's also been a lot of fun. And then I did something really neat for your Wall Street aficionados that listen to you. I bought the rights to Louis Rukeyser's Wall Street Week from Maryland Public Broadcasting. And I put that on the air. Nobody wanted it. And so I did it as an infomercial. And then I sold advertising. I bought 30 minutes of advertising on a Sunday morning from Fox Channel 5 in New York. And then I subsold advertising to my friends and colleagues in financial services. and then the Fox Business Channel picked that up. When I went to go work for Mr. Trump as one of his executives in the transition committee, I sold that to the Fox Business Channel. So it's been a fun career. I got into politics very accidentally. I would say that when I came out of law school, I didn't really have a big network, didn't know a lot of people that weren't wearing what I would call greenies. That was my father's outfit when he went to go work, and so I didn't have a white collar experience, so I got myself involved in politics. Wrote my first check to a politician in 1989 to Rudolph Giuliani. How about that? He unsuccessfully ran for mayor in 1989, but I was out there as a young Republican raising him money, and it helped open up a lot of doors for me.
I love the story, and what I love about your story is the diversity, and I think that a testament to why you have been successful, and not like really not just blowing smoke, is seriously because you just go after things. Like, I didn't bring up the 11 days in White House. I think most people are aware of that, but I wanted to let you tell your story because I think that even just jumping into that is very admirable, because there's not a lot of people that would feel comfortable just stepping into a position like that, coming from really not a lot of political background. So what makes you jump into something? How do you evaluate opportunities? What sort of pushes you in new directions that you've obviously done repeatedly over the course of your career?
Well, I would say specifically to the White House job, that was a little bit too much idealism, and I didn't really understand the world of politics. I would say that unfortunately, my parents were great people. They're still alive, thank God, but they were not well educated, and we didn't have a very good understanding about how the real corporate world or the real political world works. And for your listeners, you can't read that in a book. You can't read a history book and say, okay, now I have a good sense for how Washington works. Or you can't read about Goldman Sachs and say, okay, now I know how that works. And so for me, a lot of the stuff that's happened to me in my life has been a series of trial and error. I went to Goldman Sachs. My first job interview, I was in like 100% polyester. I bought the suit from Cy Sims. I think my shirt was 100% poly. I mean, I was fully flammable at my first job interview. And so the guy basically was very nice. He's like, look, you're a smart kid, but you're the worst dressed person that we met at the Harvard Law School. And so I had to make that adaptation, and I had to go buy a real suit before I went down for my callback interview. I would say in the world of politics, I was reasonably good as a fundraiser, but I was absolutely terrible as a political operative because I didn't really understand the lack of morals, the lack of scruples, the ridiculous backstabbing. I mean, I did watch the House of Cards, but I didn't realize that they had the House of Cards screenwriters get together with the Hunger Games screenwriters. That wasn't enough, so they added a little bit of Veep, and then they threw in the Game of Thrones, and all of a sudden they shook all that up, and you got all this nasty, crazy nonsense. So I was ill prepared for that, and so I would tell people, if you're a political fundraiser, you're probably not the best suited to work inside the White House. You're probably going to need to have some Washington-like establishment experience, or be the president's son-in-law, something like that, because it's not just not the right fit. But to your point, I've thrown myself into things I really didn't have any choice. If I wanted to be successful and wanted to live some level of the arc of the American dream, what do you got to do? You got to start your own business. You got to create a clientele. You got to manage and recruit very solid employees. You got to think creatively. You got to expect that the stuff that you're doing is not going to go well. Mike Tyson says, yeah, everybody has a plan if they get punched in the face. So I just want you to imagine my business in 2008. It was 3 years old, Skybridge Capital. We're going through the financial crisis where the U.S. markets are taken down 55%, and we're sitting there with a brand new business 3 years old. How did I retool it? How did I change it from what it originally was going to be? And so what I would say to people is, you've got to be adaptive. You've got to be fluid. You've got to recognize that your life is a series of plans, and the reason why God put an eraser on the end of a pencil is you got to erase those plans and go into redrafting constantly. Even today with the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic, our business is suffering, but guess what? 4 billion other people have had this sort of transition and dislocation. And so the number of people that live in the northern hemisphere of planet Earth, and so everybody, or a good 75% of those people, have had some level of disruption in their lives. So I would tell people it's your attitude that's going to make or break your life and your career. And so attitude, not to sound cliche, but it always starts out with gratitude. I wake up in the morning and say, okay, not the richest, probably not, obviously not the smartest, but I got a lot of good things going for me. How am I going to look at today in the most positive way possible so that I can lead my company, inspire the people that are working with me, and also, reach into and magnetize my clients that want to be with Skybridge through its ups and downs, whatever those ups and downs may be. And so, but I think the big learning lesson is that, it takes a long time to turn yourself into a success. That cliche that an overnight success is 15 years, I think that's basically true. And so you just got to stay at something, and never quit. I find that the people that have lackluster careers, or they have mediocre things, they meander and they try to day trade their careers. Not going well, okay, let me get out of this thing and let me flip into something else. Oh, wait a minute, that's not going well, okay, let me flip into something else. Well, the truth of the matter is things go up and down. I mean, they don't always go well, and it's the way you grind yourself forward when things are not going well that are ultimately going to define your career. And of course, look, you always get gun waivers in a crisis. I mean, I never know who they're going to be, but when you're in the OK corral and you're ready to draw guns and you got to shoot the other guy in the head, I always watch, like during a crisis like this, or the markets are in crisis, you always get gun waivers, in a crisis. They start waving the gun, they can't hit the target, they get nervous, they get upset. But I tell my friends and colleagues and my clients, hey, I started with absolutely nothing. If I got to go back to a white T-shirt in a one-room apartment with a rabbit-eared television and a six-pack of Schlitz watching the Mets, I am just fine. I have no problem doing that if that's where I have to go. And if you start thinking like that, you can be way more clear-headed about your decisions.
I think that I like that analogy a lot, because I think that you get to the point and it's funny because people do get to success at some point in their career and you hit on like a ton of good points, and I'm not going to just like rehash them all, but yeah, you spend enough time doing something, you will be successful. You see the people that hash something out for 10 years, they're generally doing pretty well. But I think the concept that it's okay to fail even after a certain point of time committed, like if you have that personality that's like, you're just going to nose to the grindstone and keep going, like it doesn't matter what happens at the end of the day. And I think that there's a lot of fear and a lot of fear mongering that leads to people stressing for no good reason, and it's almost like having these knee jerk reactions, and it hurts obviously everybody, but it hurts when it's like the leaders that are having these knee jerk reactions to their businesses and furloughing their their entire organization or whatnot, and it causes more stress and anxiety. And I'm sure you notice it. Like when I walk to the grocery store, for example, now I'm in Toronto. Ontario, Canada is actually doing quite well in comparison to the US right now. Like marginal amount of cases, but you walk to the grocery store and people are just aggressive and stressed out. And it's really like everyone just has to chill out a little bit because things will be better. But I like the way you put it. Like if you're okay building yourself back up, you'll be fine. That's really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the point. I don't know anybody, and I'm sure that you're interviewing a lot of people. And if someone's coming on, I would love to meet the person. Says, hey, my life started out great. I was born under a rainbow. There was a part of gold there. My parents were completely functional. They did everything perfectly as I was raised. Then I got perfect grades in school, and I went on and started my career. And my career went up in a trajectory of 45 degrees to greatness. And that's my life. Michael Dell helped me get my business started at Skybridge. He was one of my earliest investors. And he said something to me that I will never forget, and it's worth repeating here. He said, Anthony, I had to make 8,000 decisions when the business got started in 1984 through probably 1992. I had to make 8,000 decisions, and I had to go you know, 7,900 for 8,000. Like, yeah, of course, you make some bad decisions, but I had to really make a lot of really good decisions for Dell Computer to become what it ultimately became. Because, you know, there was Gateway back then, there was Compaq, there were other mail order computer companies, but Dell schmeisted all of them. And there were a lot of different things that went wrong for him. You know, he had a laptop that was catching fire. His 1993 product cycle, stock went down 70%, and the company needed equity capital and a convertible bond to help it re-establish its product cycle. And so, you know, I helped him get that done in 1993, and of course he went off to the races from there. But there's a guy, one of the richest people in the world, amazing guy, and it obviously built an unbelievable global brand. But there's a guy who, you know, was on his knees and brought himself back from the darkness. And you know, Bill Gates, you know, look, he's a amazing guy, arguably one of the richest, at one point the richest person in the world, but for his charitable giving. And he had a hard time getting that business up and running. He failed in the operating system. He borrowed $30,000 from his dad. He bought Digital Research's operating system. It was called DR-DOS. Him and Paul Allen made some changes to it and rebranded it MS-DOS, and the rest is history. He goes on to become the monopolist for the operating systems of most of the hardware in the world. So my point is that you can't look at your life and expect it to happen a certain way. You have to say, okay, I'm going to be successful no matter what, and I'm going to keep plugging. And no matter how many times I'm told no, you know, just remember this: no spelled backwards is on. Somebody's telling me no, it's turning me on. I'm not sitting there saying, oh, wow, the guy said no, I feel rejected. Let me go put my head in cold water. Let me put my sheet over my head. I'm not going to get up tomorrow morning. I just got rejected by somebody. I'm like, what are you kidding me? I mean, let me make another 15 calls. Yeah. And life is also a statistical outcome. And I don't want to use a baseball analogy, but I think it's appropriate, so I'm going to use it anyway. If you go 3 for 10 in baseball, you bat 300. And if you do that consistently, you can make it to the Hall of Fame. You only have to have 30% of the time you're at the plate, you get a hit. But the great thing about business, you have unlimited at-bats. So in an example, like if you're a great salesperson and you're going 1 for 10, and I suck as a salesperson, and I'm going 5 for 5,000, I'm 5 times better than you. The point being is that, like, you know, that persistence, that doggedness, that intensity is going to power you through, even if you're not the most talented person. You know, but that person going 1 for 10 in sales, that's amazing. I'm 5 for 5,000. You know, the averages suck, but I'm 5 times better than the guy that's not trying. Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. Now the attitude, like your attitude is 100%, like we're aligned in what it takes to be successful. Now I'm curious, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but you had the same attitude going into your career as the White House communications director. What did you discover working in that administration? Because you mentioned like it wasn't, you couldn't prepare yourself for it. It wasn't like what you knew before. So what did you sort of unearth?
Well, yeah, I was completely out of my element. So I didn't have frankly, I didn't, there's an expression in Washington, you know, Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in Washington, buy a dog, because you don't have any friends in Washington. You know, in business, it's totally different. You do have friends, but in Washington, it's all about that individual's interest, and it's all about what are they going to do to achieve that interest. And if they have to stab you in the eyeball while they're smiling at you, they're going to do that, you know, and that's Washington. And so for me, the president asked me to be his OPL director. And so that was a really good job for me. That's the Office of Public Liaison. I would have been his chief networking officer. And so I talked it over with my wife. She didn't want me to take it. I mean, she probably hates Trump almost as much as Melania hates him. I mean, I don't think she hates him as much as Melania, but it's like right at the top there, you know. And so she didn't want me to go anywhere near the guy. And I said, no, he's the president of the United States, and I'm a Republican. He's asking me to do this, so I'm going to go and do it. And then, Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon, for whatever reason, they did not want me in that job. And so they started, rather than just saying, Reince Priebus could have just said to me, hey, man, I hate your guts. I don't want you in that job. I'm the White House Chief of Staff. I would have said, okay, that's cool. I'm not even going to come to Washington. I'll just stay at Skybridge. But they did all this obfuscation, and then they did a oppo drop on me. What's an oppo drop? They dropped a story in the press insinuating that when I put my company up for sale, I was selling it to China because I was going to become this de facto secret agent for China and become their lobbyist inside the administration, which is total nonsense, right? So
It
that
sounds a little
stalled me.
crazy because
Yeah, but I mean that's what they do in Washington. So then I got on the phone with the president. I said, hey, these two guys suck. I'm just letting you know they're very bad guys. At some point, you're going to want to get rid of them. I got the fact that they've knocked me out of this job, no problem. But let me just say this: if you are getting, tired of them, which I predict you will, give me a call. I'll take care of it for you. And so it all happened very quickly. He called me. Next thing you know, I got named as the communications director. And I said to the president, that's not the best job for me. The other job would be better. He said, well, that job is open. It's available. It's in the West Wing. Come work here. And there was a degree of impetuosity there. I would say this to your listeners. Don't let your pride and your ego get into your decision making. Don't let it get in the way of your decision making. And so what happened to me is Priebus and Bannon blocked the job. I put my ego in it. The president called me to go take those two guys out. And so I went in there with a vengeance, and I made a lot of mistakes while I was there, and I didn't build enough of a coalition, and I was too trusting. And so I got on the phone with a reporter. I made a joke about Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. He recorded it. He ran to CNN with it. I thought it was off the record. He said it wasn't. Okay, big deal. And so that embarrassed the president. And then John Kelly fired me. And but the good news is I got Priebus and Bannon out of there. So I think that was a great service to America, especially with Bannon. I mean, you never met a more, wacko. I mean, with the whole nationalism and the white national ethnocentrism and all
a lot
this
of that
crazy nonsense that he.
I'm Canadian, so it comes over here. I don't hear it as much as you do, but I still hear it. Yeah.
I mean, thank God. I think if I've made any contribution to the American society or the Western canon of liberalism in my short stay in the White House, when my suicide vest was going off, it knocked Steve Bannon into Pennsylvania Avenue. So I think that was an accomplishment for mankind, or humankind. But the point being, I had my ego in there. I had my pride in there. I made a foolish mistake of trusting somebody. They used that against me. I got summarily fired. And so for me, I was like, okay, no problem. That's 100% my fault. I'm fully accountable for it. John Kelly and I have actually become close friends thereafter. And I tried to stay loyal to the president. But when he continues on the path of what he was doing, it was impossible to stay loyal. If you have a rational point of view about life, and you're listening to the nonsense, and you're watching the Twitter screeds, and you're listening to all the lies, and you're listening to the confusion and the mismanagement of the executive branch. And, Michael Lewis really wrote about it in his book. He wrote a very, very interesting book about the, I guess it was called the third or fifth risk, maybe it was called the fifth risk. And what he wrote about was, man, Trump is coming in totally ill-prepared to take on the executive branch. He also doesn't have the right management skills. He's going to blow up the executive branch. And so if there's ever a crisis, he's going to immobilize that part of the government. They're not going to be able to effectively handle a crisis.
Yeah, I just looked it up as the fifth risk. I'm just looking.
Yeah, so I read the book two and a half years ago, and so that book is very telling of what's going on right now. I mean, we probably could have avoided a lot of the economic damage and a lot of the deaths if they had acted more quickly. But they're afraid of him. He lights up these people with these tweet storms. I mean, he did it to me. Yeah. I mean, you've never felt more alive than when the president of the United States is calling you a unstable nut job on Twitter. I mean, so it's totally fine. I mean, I thought it was fucking funny. I went after him because I'm a New Yorker. and I'm not going to let a guy do that to me,
No, of
And then
course
he
not.
went after,
Then you wouldn't
right,
be a
of
New
course, and
Yorker.
then yeah, of course, and then he went after my wife, which shows you what a
That's not
lowlife the
cool.
guy is,
Yeah,
right?
that's not
And so
good.
that's you're going after my wife in your presidential Twitter feed. Okay, what do you
Yeah.
think I'm going to do? You think do I look like Ted Cruz to anybody? I mean, what are you crazy? So I'll keep punching until he gets knocked through the ropes. But he's doing a good job on himself. I mean, he's a very self-destructive guy, and I think he's heavily damaged himself, even though he has reasonably good approval ratings related to the crisis and the aftermath of this thing. I think people are really going to come to understand how much damage he did to the economy and how difficult he has been as a leader. And I think there will be in this next election cycle a return to some level of normalcy. Whatever you think of Joe Biden, pluses or minuses of him, he'll probably surround himself with some normal operating people and not this sort of kleptocracy and this sort of
So,
nepotism and
so yeah, that's
craziness
my
that's
question. Like,
taking
why
place.
can't I totally understand, but why couldn't he just like lead by advisory committee? Why was that? Because everybody knows that Trump is not an expert in
Mhm.
everything that he's trying to manage and lead and guide. So why not
He's
just manage?
insecure. No, he's wildly insecure. And somebody told me that a long time ago. Like one of my buddies is friends with him. He invited his mother to Mar-a-Lago. Trump pulled up with two Ferraris, and this like 80-year-old Italian grandmother was like, "Donald, why are you so insecure?" I laughed. I thought that was like funny, and I told my buddy, I said, "How could he be insecure? He's got tons of money, unbelievable real estate, and he's a very
Influence,
high
like yeah.
profile. How is a guy like that insecure?" But then when you meet him, like, okay, wow, this guy is maniacally insecure. That's why he's trying to compensate for it with all the blustering and like, I'm smarter than my generals. I'm a very stable genius. I know more than anybody here. I know a lot about this pandemic. My uncle was a genius, and so therefore I'm a genius. I mean, Stormy Daniels basically. I was at the Bill Maher show. She basically told me it was like the size of a shiitake mushroom. I almost threw up in my mouth when she told me that. I was like, it's disgusting. And then, I haven't been to I haven't been to a Japanese restaurant in 2 years since Stormy told me that. But then right then and there, you're like, okay, I get where this guy's coming from. He is maniacally insecure. It could be issues related to his dad, his physicality, and so this is why he acts the way he does, and that's why you can't work with Trump and expect him to treat you well, and you can't expect him to take your advice. And if your listeners want to hear, read an amazing book, it's very accurate. There was a book written called The Very Stable Genius, and Phil Rucker wrote it. There was a woman that wrote it alongside of him. I just know Phil better than her, but it was a
Mhm.
very accurate book, and it just talked about how he couldn't take any advice from any expert. He felt insecure in their presence, and if they told him something, he would almost do the opposite of it to prove or try to prove that he knew better than they did.
And that is
So
that's dangerous.
that's how it
That's a
goes.
dangerous
That's how it rolls
personality.
with Trump. What's
Yeah.
that?
I said that's a dangerous personality when you're charged with the country. That's
Yeah, but I mean,
that's
but
very
here's the
dangerous.
thing. Okay, remember this. He's dangerous, but he's got willing acolytes. Okay, I went to go work for him because I'm a naive, son of a construction worker, and I've lived a very large part of the American dream, and I'm like fighting with my wife. I mean, my wife and I filed for divorce while I was working for him. We subsequently reconciled, but it was like
Yeah,
I
thank
was
God.
doing it because I thought, oh my God, it's the American dream. I'm getting a chance to help people, public policy, all this stupid idealism, and I got caught in that crossfire. And listen, it was humiliating. It was humbling. I got a very big comeuppance. But the flip side of it was it gave me a platform. It made me a little bit more well known. It increased my public profile. It's made me somewhat polarizing because my 27-year-old son, who's at Stanford Business School, he's like, "Hey, Pop, you're killing me because the Republicans hate you because you are blasting Trump, and the Democrats are never going to accept you because you were with Trump, and
Yeah.
now you've put me in political nowhere's land." And I'm like, "Well, AJ, my son's name, I'm like, AJ, maybe I'm getting closer to the truth." Point being, I don't actually care. I mean, you get old enough in your life, this is a very important lesson, and it's a very hard lesson to learn. And even at my age, it is hard to practice. But when you can get over the hump of not caring what other people think of you, and what other people think of you is none of your business, when you can get to that point in your life, it is an amazing level of freedom. You know,
Hmm.
I put stuff up on Twitter, but I don't even look at the reply. I could care less. I shut the notices off on my phone. My
Yeah.
attitude is some of it's robotic and nasty, and some of it is keyboard warriors that are bullies, and who cares? You know, it's just when the president's coming after me, then I got to go back at him. I got to smack him up a little bit because, you know, why wouldn't you do that, right?
I don't
But
think a
you
lot
know,
of people have to deal with that problem, but yeah, that's
yeah, but I know
that's
what a
fair.
baby. I know what a big baby he is. You know, at the end of the day, he's like a big time coward. You know, just take a look at one of those clips when like he thought somebody was rushing the stage, how he was like running off the stage. You know,
I
I
saw
mean,
that
this
clip. Yeah.
guy. I mean, this guy's never been in a bar. I mean, Anderson Cooper one night was like, wow, this is like a you're having a bar fight with the president. I'm like, I'm having a bar fight. This guy's never been in a fight in his life, Anderson. You know, he's never been in a bar fight. By the way, it's not a bar fight. I've dragged the guy out into the street. You know what I mean? It's not a bar fight. But the point is that like, you know, this is the nonsense that we're living with now because myself included, and I'm responsible for this, as is everybody that voted for him, and I went to go work for him. You know, we bought into something that really wasn't there, but at least I've been able to tell the truth, and at least I've been able to say, hey, this is this sucks, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, think of it this way: if you were hiring this guy as a CEO for your company, and you were on the publicly traded board of that company, you'd be like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy. This guy's batshit, you know, he's crazy. We got to get rid of him,
I
you know.
think you always see
And
that
so,
though. You see those swings back and forth. You see
hmm
right wing, left wing leaders, and they go too
hmm
far. They go too deep into what they want to represent, and then you see the opposite end in the next vote or the next. You know what I mean? Like that's you see that a
yeah,
lot.
I think you know.
So
I mean,
people don't
listen, I
make
mean,
the smartest voting decisions either,
he
both ways.
he, he he's going to throw $10 trillion at this current pandemic problem. That may help him come election time, but you look at the data. Data is overwhelmingly against him. I mean, his numbers are incredibly soft. Many of the Republicans are rejecting what he's doing now. And a couple Tuesdays ago, Super Tuesday 3, you had 500,000 additional Democratic voters in the state of Michigan uh, for Joe Biden. And you know, if you're on the president's campaign, you have to be alarmed by that. You can't be looking at that saying, "Oh, that's a good sign." Very far from it. You know.
Yeah, well, I think that.
So
Do you think
we'll see
that?
what happens. It's a long way
Yeah,
away. Joe's lost a step. Trump acts crazy. You know, I don't know. Is this the best that America has to offer? I don't know. But we're here now, and we'll see what happens. But you know, for me, it was a learning lesson of a lifetime. And if I could share anything with your listeners on your podcast, don't put your ego into your decision making. You know, take your ego and your pride out of it. And when the handwriting was on the wall that those guys didn't want me to work in the White House, I should have listened to my wife and stayed away from it. And, you know, and that's ultimately the facts. Now, it happened and it went in a certain direction, and I have absolutely no regrets. It was a learning lesson of a lifetime. But I can tell you when I'm making the decisions, whether it's in my investment decisions, my personal decisions, my professional decisions, when I'm taking my pride out of it and my ego out of it, I'm doing a lot better.
good. No, that's good advice. What are you? So, what are you into? Obviously, Skybridge, but you wrote the book Trump, Blue Collar President.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're still involved in investments and whatnot through your firm.
Yep.
So, what else is next for you, or what are you working on now post
Well,
post
you
my
know,
path?
I'm working on my firm. You know, I wrote the book. The book sold very well, thank God, and it was a very fair book. It had positives and negatives of the president, positive and negative of me. He didn't like the book because you know he needs those sorts of books to be 125% in favor of him. But I mean, that's fine. But I mean, it was a very objective book about what happened, the pluses and minuses of what happened. And you know, I went after myself in that book as much as I went after other things that I saw. So you know, if you have a moment, it's a fast read, but
Yeah,
and I'm happy to send you a copy if you have an interest. But the you know, for me right now, I've got my asset management company. I'm going to restage my conference business once we can get out of our homes, and you know, I see tremendous opportunity in this current crisis. I think we're going to be roaring. I think the economy is going to roar after this is over. You can't hit the economy with $10 trillion of stimulus and not expect it to have a huge kick up after this thing. So I'm positioning the firm to take advantage of that, and we'll see what happens. I'm good friends with Chris and Andrew Cuomo. I sort of grew up with those guys. I do Chris's show twice a month for CNN, and we sort of, the information I'm getting will sort of be open, fully open, sort of mid-June here in New York, and I think the summer is going to be a surprising upside summer for people. I think there's a sense of appreciation for what they had prior to going into quarantine. And just like after the 100-year-old or the 102-year-old 1918 pandemic, people I think are going to come out of their houses exploding with a lot of consumption.
I think that I hope that obviously there's a huge upswing after this is all said and done, and you're the finance guy, so you have the insight into that. But I'd love to understand, what do you think in terms of I guess the way we do business? Do you think there's anything that's going to change coming out of this? Trends that have sort of been permanently changed, industries, that kind of thing? Just your insight as to what you see.
Well, I mean, look, people are saying commercial real estate is going to change because people are working at home. They don't probably need as much space as they originally thought. And retail's changing, where more habits are being developed of home delivery, and telemedicine may change some of the ways people practice medicine. But I think by and large, we're going to more or less go back to a lot of the things that we did before. I like, in particular, gaming stocks a lot, because unless you think that human nature's changed, and we've got 5,500 years of human nature that dictates that it hasn't. And I'll take you back to the 2008 crisis. They were down 90%. They're down 80% right now. Those casinos are closed. The Strip is closed. But I think people are going to be back, and I think that they're going to be. I think it's going to be a explosion to the upside. And so we own a lot of the high yield debt in gaming, whether it's Caesars or MGM. And, we're taking a contrarian play to where these things are trading at right now.
And the one thing that I want to close up, because I just want to respect your time, but and I want to also just ask a couple sort of like life lesson insight questions that I really love drawing out of people. Was there anything that we didn't discuss that you've sort of like taken on over your career that you wanted to bring up that's important or topical to you? Because if not, then I wanted to ask them closing.
Well, I guess I would just say one thing. I would say that we try to solve these problems, these economic problems, by taking the easy way out. And so our last economic crisis, we said, okay, we're just going to flood the marketplace with monetary stimulus. We're not going to have a jobs program, an infrastructure plan, a plan to right-size our educational system. We're not going to do any of those things. And so what ends up happening is the interest rates go down, the liquidity enters the markets go up, and the people that own the assets get way richer. Yeah. And the people that don't own the assets, they get frustrated and they get angry. And so in a very weird way, the monetary policies implemented after 2008 created the rise of nationalism and the rise of populism, because it really did widen the wealth gap, or the divide between rich and poor. And I'm just hoping and praying that we don't do that again here. It seems like there's enough going on in terms of a Main Street stimulus and a Wall Street stimulus where we won't do that. But I really hope we don't do that, because we have to figure out a way to solve for that and dial down the anger and get more focused on what works, less focused on left and right wing extremism, less focused on left and right, and more focused on right or wrong as it relates to policy implementation. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, because I think it's very important that we start having smart people talk about it that way, as opposed to the nonsense we see on cable news.
Do you see, like, not to go too, because that's a huge topic, but do you see any momentum, like, moving towards smarter discussions and less, like these like far right, far left leaning cable TV, election debates and whatnot, that really are not conducive to anybody's actual life?
Yeah, no, not with Trump. You're never going to get there with Trump, but hopefully you can break the fever of Trump and his demagoguery, and then you can probably get back to people are going to probably be exhausted from all that nonsense. Maybe you can get back to something that's more sensical and more,
Hmm.
uh, you know, about good policy. And again, if you want there to be fairness in the society, and I'm a capitalist, as most people are that live in the West, you got to have some fairness, though. You have to create a platform of equal opportunity, and so the government should help trying to create that platform. So if you grow up like I did, my parents weren't educated, but I got very lucky. We lived in a town that had a really good public school system. If I grew up in an area where the public school system wasn't any good, maybe I wouldn't have created that arc of intellectual education and that spark of intellectual curiosity that led me to Tufts and Harvard. And so I often say to them, geez, a lot of the stuff that happens to you in life is providential. You don't pick your parents, location of your birth, you don't pick your brain chemistry. But, we should really try to figure out if we've got people that can excel, even if they're not born in affluent areas or they're not born to, certain types of parents, can we help them create a platform of opportunity and aspirational opportunity? And I think we got to work on that now. I think that's the big challenge for the next 20 years.
I think that's also, I think that's the reincarnation of the American dream. So the original American dream is to
Amen.
succeed, but I think the reincarnation is to give people the opportunity to succeed. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Amen. Well, I appreciate all the time you spent with me. Thank you very much. It's and let me know when this goes up. We'll put it up on my social media.
No, I appreciate it a lot. I want to ask. Can I ask you one last question that I ask everybody, if that's all right? Well, actually, sorry, it's a two-part question.
Please.
The first one is one lesson that you would tell your 20-year-old self. That's the first part. Second part is, where do people find you if they want to get in touch or consume your content?
Yeah. At Scaramucci on Twitter is the best place to find me. And I would say that my 20-year-old self, and you got to really think about this. And if you're younger than me, you got to really think about this. And if I've left any impact on you listening to this, you got to do what I'm about to say. And that is, live with less fear, live with less anxiety. And you should idealize what you want to do in your life, and you should go for it. And I wish my 20-year-old self, I had that level of certainty that no matter what happened, I was going to figure it out, right? Like an entrepreneur is somebody that jumps off a cliff and builds the airplane as they're descending down the cliff. And you can do it. You can figure it out. But I had fears and anxieties and financial anxieties as a kid, and it probably limited my upside unnecessarily. And so that would be my message to people.
Beautiful.
Go for it and live your life. Who cares? You're going to be dead anyway, right? So who cares? Mel Brooks has the best line about life ever: relax. None of us are getting out of here alive. So just go for it. And I think that when you do, your adrenaline is there and you're meeting the arc of your aspiration. And even if it doesn't work out perfectly, you'll be so proud of yourself that you gave yourself the gusto and you believed in yourself enough to give it the try.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much, Anthony.
All right, man. Well, God bless. Okay.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Cheers.
Okay. All the best.
Thanks again for joining me on the Success Story podcast. Thanks again, Anthony. I really appreciate the chat. If you haven't already, please subscribe, download, share with your friends, families, peers, or coworkers. You can catch this podcast. You can stream it. You can download it wherever you can download or stream podcasts. And you can always catch it on YouTube as well. If you haven't left us a rating, that would be wildly appreciated. Any rating is fine as long as it contains 5 stars. As always, have a great week. Have a productive week, and we'll speak again soon. Bye now.